LDS. That's a heck of a turnaround. And I mean, I guess the macro question for me with the Twins would be, and we've talked about this before, but looking at the last 3 seasons now, this year, so good, last year, so bad, the year before, surprisingly good, if not as good as this year. I mean, last year the question was that when they were so bad was 2 years, the year before an anomaly, and are they actually this bad? This year, given that it's 2 of the last 3 years where they've sort of overperformed or outperformed, now I feel like last year might have been the aberration. But I think as compared to the Wild, maybe as we switch over towards hockey by way of segue, I think that the Twins seem to be an example this year of veteran leadership going right, doing its job and really being that X factor, whether it's Cruz or Scope or Crone or more importantly maybe Romo. It's where the Wild has always kind of felt like it had veterans and they brought in veterans to bolster that, and it never really seemed to amount, or hasn't over the last several seasons, seemed to amount to overwhelmingly positive overall impact on the team. It really feels like this year the veterans that they brought in for the Twins have made that difference in a positive way.
I agree, and I think that is going to help them in the playoffs as well, because they got some guys that have been there, been around the league a long time, and that's a huge advantage to have. As we were saying with the Wild, we've brought in a lot of veterans. For some reason, it hasn't seemed to change that much in their locker room, but I think the Twins, I think the younger guys definitely bought in, and their play has showed it.
Whatever they're paying Cruz, if he really has had and has the impact on Sano that it's being sort of reported that he has had, and if that becomes sort of the thing that helps Sano turn the corner from being a professional standpoint, then whatever they're paying Cruz isn't enough, frankly.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I love the spirit that Romo brings to that bullpen, and calming them down and really also overcoming the idea that they brought in. They also got Dyson, and for a couple of games he pitched pretty well after his first getting shut down for that shoulder injury, and now he's obviously on the shelf for all of the rest of the season and at least a significant chunk of next season, it sounds like. So overcoming the Dyson non-impact, I think Romo feels like a guy who's really helped solidify that bullpen in all possible facets.
I agree. Do we have an option on him next year? Or is he an outright free agent after this year?
I don't know, but man, if you'd love to, I don't know. I guess I don't know baseball enough to know how quickly you can be pull a Thomas Vanek and have or Danny Heatley and have the wheels fall off in one part or another. But I don't know. I mean, he just keeps throwing those sliders and making outs. But also, I think it's the sort of leadership and the character that he brings to that bullpen seems to have galvanized those younger pitchers as well.
Yeah, he's been a huge addition, and they talked about that when they got him, about his character and just kind of his personality and how much, I think Audra and even them talked about like how much more loose he makes it just by way of his personality. And I think you're absolutely right. It has helped calm down, that the bullpen that's probably been stressed a lot of the year.
Okay, well, I'm excited. I'm fully invested in this team, and as great as this regular season has been, and even if they lose, let's say they lose to the Yankees in the first round, even if they get swept by the Yankees in the first round, it does not change the fact that it was an incredibly entertaining regular season, and it's been great. But you heard it here first. Two expert opinions saying the Twins are going to beat the Yankees in the ALDS. So I can't wait to get that started next weekend or next Friday. All right, so the Wild's wiping. The Wild that might have been a Freudian slip. The Wild is finishing up its preseason slate today with the afternoon game against Winnipeg. This roster is pretty much set. Training camp and cutdowns have not really produced any surprises yet. One disappointment, though, which for some people, which was that Stafford did not get even a minor league deal. Although, and I want to point out, how much how frustrated do we need to be that the last official act, maybe as GM of this team, Paul Fenton signs Cody McLeod to a AHL contract, which essentially ended up being the reason why Stafford couldn't have gotten, or they couldn't really give him a shot at an AHL deal, just because the active roster, the game roster, veteran maximum down there. Where are you on Cody McLeod being a thorn in the side of this organization yet again?
I do not like that guy. I mean, Fenton is the gift that keeps on giving. And what I don't understand is if Leopold knew that there were issues and was having to watch him so closely, why did he let him make some of these last minute decisions? Yeah. I don't understand. I mean, what does Cody McLeod bring to anything?
Well, especially if Drew Stafford is out there.
Absolutely. And you know that there's going to be a lot of veterans out there that aren't probably going to have teams to play on because, of the salary cap implications. You should have known that you could probably get a couple good veterans to go down there and play.
Yeah, exactly. And your larger point, I think, is dead on, that if you're at the point where one more bad decision makes you want to fire the guy, then you've already made up your mind, right? I mean, then why let him make another potentially bad decision? So I just, we said it originally, so much of this is on, I think, our owner, and unfortunately he's the owner and he gets to do whatever the hell he wants.
Yeah, that is, that's unfortunately something that's not going to change. Luckily for us, at least as of right now, it feels like they made a good decision with Guerin. I like Guerin a lot. I like his ability to motivate.
Yeah.
I think that's also going to help get Kaprizov over here. If he's a little bit wary, Guerin has strong leadership skills. I think he'll be able to convince him when, if I'm Kaprizov, I'm probably thinking, from across the pond, like, what is going on with that organization? I think Guerin will be able to rein him in. And hopefully he, we talk about the leadership in the locker room, but maybe they need a really strong leader way up on top in the GM booth to trickle on down to the locker room, hopefully.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I like, and I think we interacted on this on Twitter a little while ago, but, I kind of feel like that so far the handful of decisions Guerin has made since he became GM, have at least come from the right place, and he's sort of, he feels like more strategic. It feels like considering the bigger picture. It feels like more of a justifiable perspective and goal for why he's doing some of these things. I mean, and that's not just ultimately the on ice affected decisions. It's going to the staffers or the social media person's going away party after on day 2 of his of being the GM. I mean, that kind of thing, recognizing that there's maybe a morale issue, and doing a pretty simple thing and going to going away party to try and start to turn that around, at least to signal that he's aware of it, and that kind of thing is the type of thing that he's going to concern himself with. So I don't know. I am not disappointed. I don't feel like this is a negative at this point. And granted, he hasn't made any sort of franchise-altering personnel decisions yet, or potentially franchise-altering personnel decisions yet. But I don't know. I'm okay with what's going on so far.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think he will come up with a plan and not just go shoot at the hip with his decisions. So I look forward to what he can do. I mean, he's obviously got a tall task ahead, but I look forward to seeing what he can come up with. Yeah.
All right. So the bigger story for me, as far as the roster players or the NHL player roster, is the potential play or issue with the play of Ryan Donato to this point. I have now let me caveat this with saying that I have not watched a second of any of the preseason Wild action. And so all of my perspective here comes from reading what Russo primarily has to say and has written and has had to say about him. But going all the way back to his performance in Iowa after getting sent down at the end of the Wild season this past season, Iowa in the playoffs, when by all reports he and also Greenway really kind of dogged it down in Iowa and through their playoff at the end of their season, the playoff run. To coming back and being given an opportunity to pivot a big line, not working out, which may or may not be entirely up to his fault in the sense that he hasn't played center in much, if at all, in a while. But I don't, Russo writing little things like Bruce is trying to find Ryan a spot on this roster. I mean, that doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel anything other than scary. What's your take on Donato so far?
Yeah, I too haven't really seen any of the preseason yet so far. I do believe Russo said Donato played much better the other night.
Dallas.
Was it Dallas? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a good sign. But, when we traded for Donato, when we made that trade, I know a lot of Boston fans saying, he came in hot right away, but he really fizzled out.
Yeah.
Quickly, which is kind of, he came in on fire after that trade. And we were just like, wow, this is just great. And towards the end of the season, he became a little bit more invisible. And then I don't know if it was an attitude issue or what with him and Greenway down in Iowa for the playoffs last year, but by all reports, they were just going through the motions and didn't put in much effort, which was extremely disappointing.
Yes. Especially because Cunningham was the opposite.
Right. Yeah. Because Cunningham was, he puts his heart and soul into everything, and he was awesome for them down there.
Yeah.
And at the end, so Donato has spent some time in the AHL, but Greenway, Cunningham spent a good chunk of the year down there last year.
Mm-hmm.
Greenway has never, he's been sent down for like a week at a time, maybe a couple of times. He's never had to put in his time down there. So for him to go down there with an attitude, like I'm not going to give it my all, is really disappointing for me.
Agree. Yep.
But he too apparently in Dallas had a much better game on the fourth line with Eck and Foligno.
Yeah.
So we'll just have to see throughout the season, but it certainly is concerning because Donato was supposed to be, the best of the three trades.
Yeah.
For Fenton, Rask isn't even, he's in $4 million in the press box. My guess is he gets bought out after this year.
Yes.
I don't think the hit is as bad after this year, but.
No, Rask is. To hear Russo talk about on the podcast with Jim from yesterday or the day before, Rask just doesn't have an NHL level game skating wise. That's it. If I ever feel too good about this team, I can just dial back the old memory to that particular trade, and I'll just get frustrated all over again. Or if I ever start to feel charitable towards Paul Fenton, I can remember that trade. But. Yeah, as far as as far as Rask, he's after this season's two more at $4 million, and what is it? Double the length and 2/3 of the salary cap hit. So, that would be 4 years at whatever, 3 and change or a little under 3. That's not the end of the world, especially because it's not great, but especially because after this season, Ennis's buyout dies, right? So this is the last season that Ennis is on the payroll as a buyout. We're paying him one. So after this season, maybe, given that the Wild always seems to have a player on a buyout.
I was just going to say, it feels like we always have somebody we're paid
so
to
ridiculous.
not be on the team anymore.
Which predates Fenton, by the way.
It does.
Absolutely. Yeah. I heard Bruce on NHL radio, and one of the questions that he was asked was about his usage of his goalies. And he and Russo talked about that at the fair as well, and if it's, sort of 50 to 60 starts for your quote unquote starter, your number one, and then, 20 to 30 for your backup, in the first place, I think the main question is, can this team be a playoff team with Al Stalock getting 25 to 30 starts?
Look, I don't think they're really that much of a playoff team with Dubnyk getting 70 starts.
Yeah.
So with Stalock, I don't know. And to me,